Welcome everyone to Orange Audubon's monthly webinar. This month we're talking about feeding birds and Project Feeder Watch. Thank you for joining us. Orange Audubon's mission is to promote public understanding of and interest in wildlife and the environment that supports it. And we're doing this particular webinar in coordination with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They provided a lot of these materials, and their mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. And they have a separate department called the K-12 program, and they provide innovative resources and training that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to their local habitats, explore biodiversity, and engage in citizen science projects. And if you have not checked out their website, I encourage you to do so. They do have a lot of curriculum resources. They have many free downloads. They have kits you can buy, and they do have educator training. So I did get to attend one of their in-person trainings at the lab, and I recommend that. So the way the Cornell Lab sets up their educational programming is to first engage students, then get them to explore, and then get them to inquire, which is the way science works. So what about birds? Why feed birds as part of your curriculum? Well, birds can use our help, especially with, habitat loss and things like that. So when you're feeding birds, you're providing nutrients for them as they might be nesting or on migration, or it could be less resources in winter. Of course, in Florida, we're not going to see this scene, but different times of year, they might have a little more trouble finding resources. And also, a feeder brings the birds to you so your students can study them, which makes it a lot of fun. Feeding birds is exciting. It's real world. It's an opportunity to study wild animals. There's not many wild animals you can study outside your classroom window. It is low cost. You could do it anytime during the year. And it does help birds. It will spark their curiosity, and it does connect your students to their local environment. So there's a lot of benefits to feeding birds. And why birds? Why not another animal? Well, once you start looking, you're going to see birds all around. Maybe not quite this many, and once your students start looking, they'll see them at the playground, at PE, outside their home. They'll really start paying attention too. So there are different kinds of feeders, and I will introduce you to a website that's going to help you, but just generally you can choose different kinds of feeders. It can actually become part of an inquiry project to see what feeders attract what birds, and you can even potentially make feeders too. And this shows some of the different kinds of feeders. This one looks homemade, where they just took a branch that was cut and filled it, drilled holes in it and put suet in there. So there's all different kinds of feeders, and you don't have to spend a lot of money on feeders. And then, there's different kinds of seeds you can use. I'm going to show you on the Feeder Watch website. It gives you more information. But if you want a basic start of like, what should you get? Black oil sunflower seed, which is pictured on the far left. Most birds, as you can see from this chart, will eat the black oil sunflower seeds, and it's readily available, and that way it's less wasteful too. What if you are not allowed to use feeders on your campus? That can happen. So you could use something really good, which are native plantings. So this painted bunting here, yeah, it'll come to a feeder, but if you have the right plants, it'll come to those too. And if you have a water source, whether it's a pond or a bird bath, that in the right situation can also attract birds. So we're going to talk about Project Feeder Watch. This is the website. They've updated it recently. It's excellent. It's got lots and lots of resources for you. So what is Project Feeder Watch? And you'll notice these are actual slides I got from the website, which are available to you as well if you want to introduce this to your faculty. You can use those slides as well. or the video that we're going to put out. So anybody can participate in Project Feeder Watch. It started this month. It runs all the way to April. You don't have to start it right away, but you can. You're going to count the maximum number of each species you see during your counting time, and you can provide data for something being present or that it's not there. That's valuable too. And they also have a way for you to indicate how birds are behaving towards each other. And that's something new that they've added recently. So over 20,000 participants a year, over 52,000 count sites, over 100 million birds have been reported. Loads of scientific papers are based on the research. This project started in Canada in 1977, and the Cornell lab joined in 1987. And this is fully funded by participant fees and gifts. So this is the only program of Cornell that's a participatory science that there's a small fee. It's only $18 for a year. And it covers the cost of their website and some materials that they send you. So it's well worth it. And there are ways that teachers can get a discount, and there's ways that you can get a scholarship towards next year. I think they've already gotten all theirs out for this year. So what's this useful for? Well, it helps the scientists to understand shifting bird populations. They can see winter ranges. Are the birds going in different places? Are they not in some places they used to be? Eruptions for different birds. My friend and I were talking about, there's some birds showing up where we live that normally are way up north. So they can track that from Feeder Watch data. Non-native species, sometimes birds do come to our feeders and they're not well, so they can monitor disease outbreaks and more. So there's a lot of information there. So why do Project Feeder Watch with your students? Well, feeding birds create opportunities for inquiry. So for example, this is a photo of one classroom setup. They didn't get any birds. So that led to a lot of questions about why didn't we get birds? And from there, these students actually did some habitat improvement and they were able to get some birds. So here's the Feeder Watch website. And when you go there, you can see how to register. You can see the instructions. You can see the materials that you'll get. And there's a lot of other information there. Lots and lots. A lot of things about feeding birds. If you're worried about different aspects of feeding birds, it's all in there. And identification, all kinds of stuff. So here is on the Feeder Watch website. If you click on the feeding birds, you can pull up this little tool where you can go to time of year, like winter, and where you're located, and you can pick the type of food, or you can do all the food, and then it'll generate a list of birds that would eat that kind of food or visit that type of feeder. So you can filter it in all kinds of different ways. And this could be a long-term project where your students research what they want to attract, and then you can try to attract them. You can go back here, and if you click on a bird, like this is a Baltimore Oriole, you can see where they are. Like in the southeast, we have some Orioles. You can see what food that they eat. So this is a bird that doesn't eat seed. They come to sugar, water, fruit, and suet, and what kind of feeder to use with them. And then there's a link here to go to All About Birds, which is an excellent resource to learn all about different birds where we live. You could make feeders yourself if you try that. Low cost, exciting for the students. You might think, well, what about the squirrels? Aren't they going to eat the seed? Well, yeah, they will, some, but there are things you can do. You can use these things called baffles. And the other thing, you want to keep the feeder at least 10 feet away from a tree or the side of a building, because the squirrels will jump. And you might wonder, well, I'm afraid birds are going to hit the window because hopefully if you're setting up a feeder, you hopefully might have a window you can look through to watch your feeder. That's what I did in my classroom. So, and this is on the Feeder Watch website, but this shows like the safest zone to put your feeders, because if the feeders are too far away and the birds are at the feeder and they get scared, they could fly right to your window, which has happened at my house before. So if you're a little bit closer, they can't build up speed. The other thing is there are things you can do if you find birds are hitting your windows. There's some commercial products you can buy that are little rolls of these tape with little dots that are easy to take off, and you can look through the window both ways. From the outside, this is an angle. You really don't see them, and it keeps the birds from seeing, oh, I can just fly through there. And there's other things you can do. You can use like washable window markers and things like that if you're getting bird strikes. So on the Feeder Watch website, they do have a community tab and they have a blog. Now that Feeder Watch just got started, there'll be participant photos. There'll be, you can, if you can't do a feeder at your school, you can watch their feeders. That's very cool. And students can see snow and ice and all that fun stuff. There's a place with tips, and I thought this was cool. This one was from a teacher, and she does a dry erase board and puts the most common birds at her feeder in permanent marker and then does the tally in erasable. And that's kind of neat. And then this person created their own like special feeding station because they wanted to photograph the birds and not have them like on metal feeders. So she put like branches of plants and logs around, and like within a day she got a super rare bird. So you never know. For educators, they have a whole tab on resources. You have classroom guide. Here's how you get classroom funding. I think it's gone for this year, but you can still get like a $5 discount. And there's a Feeder Watch design challenge, so your students can design their own feeders. And this shows a classroom in New York, and this is, I think, that students can sign up to view a window during like the morning, not during the class time, but during off times, maybe lunch, and they come in and watch. And I'll show you what my classroom area looked like when I used to do it. So when should you feed birds? You can feed them year round. You really can. Times of the year, sometimes a year, you'll get more birds than others, but that's part of the learning experience. So you might wonder, well, what's wrong here? If you look closely, some birds of prey, this is a kestrel, they've moved in. So if you have something like that happen, this was my house, then you take your feeders down for a couple weeks and these birds will decide there's another place I can hunt, okay? Nothing to think about with feeding birds is a great time to teach about habitat requirements of animals. So you can teach your students that habitat is a place where an organism lives. It's made up of food, water, cover, and space. And then if you want to do an actual habitat improvement on your campus, you can teach them, well, is this a habitat? Well, yeah, you can find in the city food, water, cover, space. It might not be quite the same as if you're out in a natural, like a state park, but it can do for a lot of animals. So you can ask your students, well, look at this picture. Is this a habitat? Yeah. There's places for birds to hide. There's insects for them to eat off the plants and seeds. And most likely they probably have a water source there. So it's a habitat. So if you want to do a habitat improvement, you can have your students like create a plan. What do we need here? Because just putting feeders out, you might not get birds because they need places to hide while they're not at their feeder and they need a source of water. So you're going to need to look a little more deeply. It doesn't need to be a big space, but having all the components will help ensure that you get some birds. They can create a habitat map. They can draw pictures. This is what I think we should do. And then you put your plan into action. So this was the picture I showed you earlier of these students and how they took, they only had this little area and they said, well, we can take, a raised bed and then put native plants and have some bushes here, and then the birds can hide there. And then for feeder watch, you're going to end up counting the birds at your feeding site. So I'll go through that a little bit. And this was where I had a portable classroom and I had my feeding station right outside that window there. And so when students finished their work, they could go back there and they could watch. But feeder watch runs from November 1st through April 30th. And when you decide to count, whatever week you decide to count, you have to do 2 days in a row. And it can be as short as an hour, or it can be all day. And you will record behaviors, and it's okay if you can only do this once for the whole season, but it's a lot of fun if you could do it every week. Your students will enjoy it a lot. So basically, this is how to count. You record the maximum number of each species seen simultaneously, so they have to be seen at the same time. And you explain to your students, you say, well, here's some pine siskins, and if you see this one, then you see 5 more, do you add this one with it? No, because that one could be part of this group. So it teaches them scientific protocol. And you do it over 2 days. So the highest number of that species you've seen at one time over the 2 days is the number you put in. And you don't need to count, and you should not count any bird that's flying over. And any bird you see on a count, you're not counting that day, you can't count it. Now, you could do eBird, but that's a whole nother discussion. And you are going to record behavioral interactions. So displacement is when one bird tries to take over the food or perch occupied by another bird. So here's a northern flicker is getting, I guess the starling was here and the flicker took over. And predation, when one bird attempts to capture or kill another bird, that does happen. You'll submit your data. Now you can submit it on their website. It's very easy to do. It's very user-friendly. It's very simple to do that. You will record the weather and the time, and that's fun for students to observe as well. And what if you can't identify the bird? Well, on the website, there's a section that says identify your birds. And then when you open up that tab, you'll see a link to All About Birds online guide. There's some other things too. They have some PDFs, but those are good. But this All About Birds is a great guide. And what you can do is you can type in birds near me. You put in what city you're near and the date, and it'll generate a list of the most common birds seen in your location on that date. It'll have a couple of photos, and you can listen to the sound, and it'll have a little description. So that will be very, very helpful to you. There's also an app. So the nice thing about the app, if you use the app to upload your information, it actually has the field guide on the app, so you can double check if what you're seeing is what you think you're seeing. Once you've recorded your data and you submitted it, you can go back and you can look at your data, and you can do it for multiple years. So you can go back and see trends if you're doing the same location year after year. And if you have older students, you can actually look at trends across different regions of the United States and pull out all kinds of information. All this is on their website. So if you're interested in doing this, you just need to go to feederwatch.org, and you will get a handbook with instructions. You'll get a feeder bird poster. You get a calendar. You can keep track of your days that you're going to count. And the next year, you'll get highlights of the Feeder Watch season, which is from November through April. So next webinar will be December 3rd. We're going to do Counting Birds for Science, which is not quite the same as Feeder Watch, but it's doing the eBird, which you can count birds anytime. And me as a former educator, that's kind of how I got started. I started with Feeder Watch and then decided, well, we should be able to count birds at other times because we're seeing a lot of stuff, and that's what we did. So even if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, you can email me at education@orangeaudubonfl.org to get a certificate of participation. I'll just ask you to write me a brief summary of what you learned or what you plan to implement. And if you're in Orange County, Florida, Orange Audubon does have a few native plant mini grants available. If you want to start doing that habitat improvement, we can help you out. So thank you again for joining us for this webinar, and I hope to see you next month, and good luck if you're doing Feeder Watch. Your students are going to love it. Thank you.